The terrible death of the prophet Uzziah at the hands of King Manasseh. This is the story of one of the most famous prophets of the Old Testament, the prophet Uzziah, who also predicted the suffering of Jesus Christ and whose prophecies always came true. Without fear, he criticized the decisions of the kings and predicted tragedies for Israel if they continued on their wrong path. There are over 65 references to Uzziah in the New Testament, and Uzziah is mentioned more than 20 times. According to traditional stories, he met his death in a horrible way, being sawn in half by King Manasseh. Uzziah, son of Ahaz, one of the most well-known prophets of truth in the Old Testament, began his prophecy in the days of King Uzziah in 745 BC. He predicted God's judgment on the king and the people through his prophecies. He was a central prophet of the Old Testament, along with prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. His ministry unfolded during the turbulent periods of the kingdom of Judah, which spanned the reigns of kings such as Uzziah, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Manasseh. In his early prophecies, in 735 BC, he prophesied to King Uzziah that he saw his death and the death of his wife and 2 sons. He gladly accepted the prophetic mission because he recognized the moral situation of his people at that time, which led him to want to save his people from the impending tragedy. In addition to the social corruption he witnessed, he also saw the depravity of the rulers, the depravity of the rich, and the superstitions and idolatry of the entire population. At the same time, he saw the growing strength and approach of the Assyrian conqueror to the land of Israel and connected the two, saying that the people's sins would lead to destruction. Uzziah was involved in the politics of the kings. Perhaps under his influence, King Hezekiah began his religious reform to purify idolatry. But, on the other hand, Hezekiah did not accept Uzziah's political advice and rebelled against Assyria, for which he paid a high price. King Hezekiah, a descendant of David, inherited a sinful and corrupt kingdom during a period of significant changes in the political landscape. Before his eyes, the kingdom of Israel fell into the hands of Assyria, which threatened to continue the occupation and destroy his kingdom as well. Hezekiah prepared for a general rebellion for the long siege in Jerusalem, but at the same time he was also ready to bow down and send a message of surrender. In one of Isaiah's prophecies written in chapter 36, it is said that Sennacherib went to war to restore his rule and kill those who rebelled against him. As a result, King Hezekiah went to the house of God and prayed. From there, he sent a message to Uzziah, the prophet, to pray as well. Uzziah intervened to help Hezekiah and prophesied that the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, would eventually leave the land and be killed in his own land. And, as it happened in the end, the sons of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, killed him. After the death of Hezekiah, his son Manasseh took the throne at the age of 12 and became the king of Israel. Manasseh did evil in the sight of God, was the most wicked king, and was drawn to idolatry. He raised altars for Baal and Asherah. Using his prophets, God revealed a judgment against Manasseh. God said he would deliver the remnants into the hands of their enemies. Manasseh's reign is described in 2 Kings 21 and 2 Chronicles 33. The books describe Israel and its king worshipping idols, believing in sorcerers, committing violence, and persecuting prophets. During this time, Manasseh, the king of Judah, was a significant part of the chain of kings, responsible for the destruction of the temple and the exile of Judah. He was king for 55 years. More than any other king in Judah and Israel. He was even defined as the most wicked king, who harmed his people and their faith in God. His sins left an impression on the nation even after his death. In his days, a decree of exile was issued over the kingdom of Judah. Perhaps this is why the Bible dedicates only a few verses to him. In 2 Kings, only 18 verses are dedicated to him, and in 2 Chronicles, only 20 verses. For comparison, let's remember that Ahab, who reigned for less than half the time of Manasseh, 22 years, the author of 2 Kings dedicates 5 chapters to him. The scripture describes his reaction to those who opposed his policies, and especially to prophets who stood against him. Manasseh persecuted God's prophets and their followers, killing them because they opposed his policy of idolatry. According to tradition, King Hezekiah, Manasseh's father, married the daughter of the prophet Uzziah, meaning he is the grandson of the prophet Uzziah, whom he also killed in the end. According to the Jewish Talmud and other ancient sources, the last moments of Uzziah are described as his attempts to avoid his fate because King Manasseh persecuted him to death. In the story of his last moments, Uzziah's life became bitter and tragic due to the persecution of King Manasseh, who feared for his throne and murdered him. Manasseh challenged the prophet Uzziah to provide evidence supporting Moses' prophecies, the prophecy in which he sees God, contrary to Moses' words that, "Man shall not see me and live." Although Moses himself saw God on Mount Sinai, as written in Exodus 24:10. Instead of responding to him, whose answer would lead to his immediate death, Uzziah decided to flee. According to this legend, during his escape, the prophet saw a cedar tree called the name of God and was immediately swallowed by it. King Manasseh ordered the tree to be sawn and thus killed the prophet. But miraculously, the tree was not sawn until they reached the place where the prophet's lips were. At the moment when the miracle ended, the tree was sawn and the prophet was killed. Some other stories tell that Uzziah was imprisoned inside a hollow tree trunk and sawn in half. Sawn in half is a painful execution method known since ancient times, expressed in different forms, vertically or horizontally from head to feet. There are sources that claim such cruel methods were used in different periods. Uzziah faced challenges and opposition, particularly from those in power. He criticized the decisions of the kings, predicted tragedies, and urged Israel to seek God first. However, his messages were often ignored. King Manasseh, in particular, rejected Uzziah's teachings, which led to increased apostasy and persecution of the righteous. Uzziah's role was not just that of a preacher under the aggressive Assyrian Empire. He presided over a crisis that left a lasting impression on Israel's history. According to Uzziah, the leadership would be destroyed because they were too self-confident and did not trust God's solutions. They trusted in their military power and alliances with foreign nations, but not in God's guidance, and this is the sin of human pride. Uzziah also prophesied and referred to the end of days, which is connected to the day of judgment. He really wished for a world in which goodness and justice prevailed, a world in which people defended the oppressed, protected the wounded, and gave shelter to widows and orphans. Reflecting on Uzziah's journey, we perceive the echo of his courage in our own lives. Facing a world full of challenges and uncertainties, the memory of his unwavering dedication serves as a beacon of hope. Inspired by his story, a group of individuals from different walks of life unite. Determined to make a difference, they recognize that despite adversities, they possess the strength and conviction to promote positive changes. Uzziah's legacy, therefore, lives not only in words, but through the acts of those he inspired. His desire for a world governed by goodness and justice resonates in the daily actions of ordinary people who choose to stand up, protect, and shelter. In the end, Uzziah's story does not end with him. It continues in each one of us, reminding us of the power of faith, hope, and determination in facing adversities to build a better future.